Wait, where did I put my lucky rabbit's foot?
Hey y'all, welcome to the Lucky Rabbits Talk Show. I am Prudence. You can call me Prue. Mason isn't here. He's kind of taking on more of an editing role in a back seat. But I am here with someone really interesting, someone really sweet, someone really cool, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name's Krissey. I met up with Prudence at one of the Psychic and Crystal fairs recently in January. And I'm a practitioner, I'm a holistic healer, I'm a psychic medium. I have so many Reiki certifications. I think I'm just collecting them like Ariana collects rings now. Um, I do IT. I go and channel new and different healing practices because ultimately what I believe is we're all just holding on to too much stuff and we've just got to go and let it down so we can heal. So
Yeah.
that's just sort of like kind of me. And then one of the questions was like the Prudence had given me was like, how did you discover your gifts? Um, I've always been like this. I was the creepy kid at funerals. And how I know this is when my mom passed away many years ago, this woman came up to me and she's like, "Are you one of Evelyn's daughters?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Are you my sister's name or me?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm me." And she's like, "Oh, you probably don't remember me, but I was your neighbor on the farm." I left the farm when I was like 4 years old. So I'm like, no concept of who this lady is. And I'm like, just smiling and nodding, you know, how you go and sort of like
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
entertain the white folk, basically the white hairs and, you know, the granny. And she's laughing and she's like, "You probably don't remember even what you did at my husband's funeral." I'm thinking to myself, okay, I must have been about 3 when, you know, so I'm thinking I ran around. So I'm like, whatever I did, I apologize profusely. And she's like, "No, no, no. I was off in the corner and I was just crying a little bit because, you know, I'm burying my husband. And you came up to me and said, you know, why are you sad?" And I didn't know how to explain death to a 3-year-old. So I just went and said, "I'm just sad. I'm never going to see your Uncle Jack again." She said, I looked her dead in the eyes. I looked right behind her and then looked her dead in the eyes and says, "But he's right behind you and he's sad that you're sad. Why are you crying?" And
That is so
immediately,
interesting.
so at 28, I'm like, oh my God. I was so closed at this. I had no recollection of doing any of this. So I was like, "Oh my God, I'm a creepy kid at funerals. I'm so sorry. What did you do?" She's like, "It was okay. Your mom came and got you. And then we just never brought you to funerals ever again."
That
Um,
is so interesting, especially just having it at a young age like
yeah.
that.
So it was only when I got to the age of 40, or as I call it, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, good. I call it my fuck at 40 line, where I just didn't give an F over what people were going and saying. And I'm like, I'm going to go find out what this Reiki thing is that I keep hearing about. Um, and then as my gifts developed and I opened up, I'm like, oh, 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 it was like it was my Men in Black moment where I started remembering all of the stories. I started remembering. Um, I would have been about the same age. And my mom and dad had told me that her cat Blackie had ran away. And Blackie was my cat, and I was so upset. And I remember looking up at the stairs to the attic one day and seeing a black cat with the eyes. And I was so happy. And I'm like, "Mommy, mommy, mommy, Blackie's back." And then they had to go and sit the 3-year-old down and say, "No, Blackie's not back. Daddy ran Blackie over with a tractor and
Oh my God,
Blackie's buried."
I remember you told me that story at the fair. I was like, that sounds familiar. That is so,
Yes.
yes.
So I had Christian missionary grandparents, so obviously closed myself and blocked myself, triple checked and locked. Um, but life has a way of going and sort of growing up around. My clairsentience developed, my clairaudience developed, my claircognizant, and once I started doing Reiki, my clairvoyance started coming back from there. But it's always sort of like that deep knowing and then singing things, or I can't stop. It's like someone keeps knocking at the door with something. Does this piece of information make sense? So
Yeah.
going and sometimes people have it their entire lives. They're developing it because they have a very nurturing environment. There are other times where it's just like, nope, 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 that's not normal, and just lock it up from there.
Yeah, I definitely had the second one for sure too. It's interesting. I was talking to Lindsay, who does the fairs earlier, and she seemed to be oh, no. She seemed to be in that closed off one, but the person after that, whose name was Fernando that I interviewed, had a really nice experience growing up where they had like a lineage that they had come down and they were really nurtured into it. And I wish that more of us had that, because being kind of shut down or shut off, it like really blocks things out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah. Well, where I get 80% of my gifts comes from my dad's line. My dad was very, very psychic, very, very intuitive. And then he passed away when I was like 21. So I like over 30 years ago. But the stories that people have told me about what he's um, heard, seen, talked to from the other side is just like, yeah, no, the Irish is strong in us.
yes.
Yeah.
That's another recurring theme, is Irish people having like that what they called it, something in Irish mythology, like the faith. I think it's just pronounced the faith, but it's spelled fater,
Yeah.
and it's like the clear knowing.
Yeah. And they also go and say like the Tuatha De Danann, which was sort of like the mythical creature, and this is how we were closer to spirit. But it's just it's funny how things just sort of come out and then they just start recombobulating. But I talk to a lot of women where they go and hit their fuck at 40 line. Or there's people where I go and say, it's all good. You hit your fuck at 50 line, it's all good. But there are people going and saying there's got to be more to life than this. There's
Yeah,
got to be something.
that's
And
interesting that it comes at like the older age too, right? Like as at a young age, it's really prevalent, and then at an older age, you're saying that like as you kind of like care less again, or like get more detached from things, like the intuition kind of starts coming in.
it's more like you stop caring about what other people's opinions are because you've been so burned. You start on your path of rediscovering who you are at your core. And
Yeah,
that's the bucket 40. Um, and honestly, the friendships I've made after 40 are magical.
good. That's good to hear, because I just hit 30 and it's like I'm like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's almost like in my 20s I had like a complete wild streak. I knew that there was like, I've always like studied like certain like spiritual practices and things, and it got like majorly turned on around 28. And as I'm getting older, I'm like cutting off with those like kind of dumber things I was doing in my 20s. And as that's happening, like I'm kind of stepping into a point where I care a lot right now. Like in my 20s, I like over cared about what people thought in like kind of more of a stylish way. And as I'm getting into my 30s, I'm like, oh God, I don't know. You just really start to feel like a sense of responsibility. So it's good that in 10 years, I'll be able to kind of be like, fuck it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Or
awesome.
sooner. Yeah.
Oh, hopefully sooner. That would be really nice.
Yeah. But
It must.
it makes sense. The fuck at 40.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So you said that, wow, that's so interesting. You said 28 though was like when you started remembering or getting back into like those memories.
No, when I was 28, that's when my mom passed away. So it was just sort of
Oh,
like one of those little rabbit holes, or those little, Rice Krispie treats, or the breadcrumbs through the woods. Um, there was a lot of times when I was a child, like I had angels. I didn't know they were angels. I was raised not with the archangels and all of that, just, you know, God, Jesus, he has angels not named. But I always resonated with Michael, with Raphael, with Gabriel, with Ariel, Uriel. And it's so interesting. And then when I was starting on my journey, Archangel Metatron came in when I
oh,
was doing my um, certified angel healing practitioner course. And we were doing a meditation, and we were on our journey to find our, spiritual guides and angels. And he came in, and I'm like, I still remember this today. And you can go and tell what type of person I am. He walks in, and I'm like looking at him going, "You're an archangel. You're not supposed to be one of my guides. You're way too powerful for this."
too
I'm looking,
elevated or like,
yeah,
yeah.
like, what are you talking about? No, you're not supposed to. And he looked at me, and I still remember this, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll show you." And then he walked out. And I'm like, "Okay." And then there was nothing. So I'm like, well, blah, 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 blah. So the next morning, my friend Christy, who was in the same class, started this off by going and saying, "Oh,
Oh,
I've got the jasmine tea that you liked." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You said you really liked jasmine green tea." And I said, "No, I didn't." She's like, "Yeah, we had a conversation at the end of the day." And I'm like, "Christy, we did not have a conversation."
that's
And then
wild.
my archangel, yeah. So the angel teacher is going and saying, "Well, that's interesting because um, Jasmine is actually one of Archangel Mike or Archangel Metatron's um, sense that he brings in." And he was like, when I went to go and open the room before you guys came here to invoke the angels in there, he was the first one
You
waiting
smelled
in
it.
line. And he was insistent that he was going to be the only one here today. And he was showing up for someone. So I'm just getting redder and redder and redder. Like the angels have just gone, and like I'm on the spot. And
Put you
like,
on blast almost. Yes.
yeah. And then two other people had actually gone and put jasmine incense on that morning to meditate before they got there. So I'm like
Wow.
sitting there going, I could have ignored like a couple of them, but just the way that everything was coming on, and I'm like, yeah, he's here for me. And looking at me like, what are you talking about? And then I'm having to explain. And my teacher's like, she was also my Reiki teacher. So she's like, "I've never heard of anyone arguing with an archangel before, but if ever there was going to be one, it would be you, Krista." But I'm
I
like,
love that energy. I love
yeah,
that energy because sometimes like we might be like down here and we might be like lower vibration than like whatever's happening, but like we also get our own opinion and we also get to dictate how our experience goes. And sometimes like you have to be a little bit pushy if you're a medium.
yeah. But as she went and said, and it wasn't that, you were insistent about anything. You were like, no, 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 get out of the way. I'm looking for my real guide. And he's coming in. And there was definitely a reason for him to go and come in about everything. But it was just like, it was so funny because it was like, no, get out of the way. Where's my real one? Like,
Yeah, I had a similar kind of experience because I never really resonated with like the religious side of things, and during like kind of one of my awakenings, I like Raphael was one that came through, and I had no idea what archangels even were, and like the energy of like Raphael was coming through, and I had no idea how to facilitate that. So it's a good thing that you had a class. I mean, for me, I really was like, I don't know what this means. I don't know. I still really don't. I actually, throughout all of these conversations, angels have come up, and I feel like I should really do more research, especially, I don't know, especially if I've had that. It's really easy to ignore something you think is too grand for you.
ultimately, how to go and how my interpretation of angels are ubiquitous between all religions. They are sort of like the knowledge keepers to come down, to inspire humanity, to remind them of their connection to the greater universe, to God, the divinity, however.
Yeah. In like a
Yes.
non-denominational way, it's like less
Yeah.
threatening to think of.
Yeah. And it's just sort of like, we're here to go and help you move forward.
Yeah. I love that. That's actually a great way to think about it, especially because it is that thing where it's intimidating. It's really intimidating, and it depends on because you had a religious upbringing that was a little more Christian, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have that upbringing and you aren't someone, I mean, so I'm not really someone that the church would invite in typically. So
Mhm.
I always really like shied away from that. But if you have that upbringing, then I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting way to inform your practice or like your channelings.
Mhm. And like in one part of my healing techniques, I do use angelic. Um, and that's sort of like with the integrated energy therapy, we work with angels a lot there.
Cool. Yeah. So with healing, what kind of healing do you do? So do you kind of mix Reiki, or is like the angelic work part of the Reiki you do?
So I come at things where I'm sensing the pain of others in my own body. Yay, being an empath. Uh, it's not always great because it's like, is that my pain or is that your pain?
Yeah.
And quite often I go and sort of cycle through going and saying, this is not going on. This is not my energy. Like I had someone sit down, she wanted a mediumship this past weekend, and I looked at her eye, and then all of a sudden my eye started going milky, and I'm like, just 1 second. And I'm like, I can't clear my eye. Do you have issues with your right eye? She's got cataracts
Oh, wild. Yes.
in her right eye.
This is very similar to like my mom has that, but she turns it off. And if you don't work through it, it'll start to actually affect you
Yeah.
yourself because you have
So
to
it
deliver
just,
those messages.
yeah. So when I'm doing a Reiki session with someone, I start off usually, if I'm able to go and do it online via Zoom or in person, I usually go and book 2 hours because I go take people through all of their pain points. From going and getting all of their pain points, I start looking up where the meridians are on those pain points. Then I go into the meridian flow wheel. And I'm like, do you have either really, really hot or really, really cold at these areas of the day? And invariably, yes or no. Um, but then what ends up happening is if I go and trace the deficiencies in the meridians, all of a sudden I go and start finding their pain points
Interesting.
and tracing it back younger, that there was damage to the meridian when they were younger, like a broken bone or something like that.
Oh, okay.
So, sort of like peeling back the layers. And then it's like, okay, was this happening? Was this happening? Pull everything together. And then I go and use Louise Hay's Heal Your Body book. So her little blue book. And then I'm looking up all of the ailments, coming up with the negative thought patterns, making sure that they make sense, and then coming up with like a little script. Um, so it's just like when I'm going and doing the Reiki, I'm going and elevating the intention to that level of the new thought pattern so that people are able to go and hold it a little bit easier. So almost like surrogacy positive affirmation
I love
implantation.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. That must be like, that is quite the process. I can
Yeah.
see why it would take 2 hours. So
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with what meridians is that.
So when you go and look at traditional Chinese medicine,
Okay.
all of your organs have a pathway through your body to get their energy. And every 2 hours, one of the major organs in your body is holding the energy. Think of it as a um, water wheel.
Oh, that is fascinating.
So 2 hours, your heart's going to go and work on stuff. And then what's going to happen is it's going to transfer the energy into another organ, and then it's going to go and take what has happened before and use it to go and do its repair, and then it's going to go and add energy into the basket. Think of it like a wonderful cookie exchange
Yes.
where people are taking stuff out and putting stuff in and then passing it along. And then for until they get the energy back, they've got the energy that it needs.
That is fascinating because that's it's almost close to like how people look at chakras, but a slower, steadier, more
Yeah.
like cyclical cycle. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, and you said that like the thought patterns can be affected by trauma caused to different meridians at different times of your life.
Yeah. Because you've got to go and think of everything as your cellular body is going and storing your memories. So when
Yeah.
you're going and working on your cellular layer, you're going and releasing that trauma, positive and negative. Or think of it, instead of positive, negative, think of it as stale and think of it as fresh.
Yes, right. Okay, so in that system, right, like your brain is always powered, so your brain is always connected to that energy, and when that energy hits a certain place, your brain's thought patterns are going to be affected by the energy that's there and how that energy is affected.
Yep.
Oh, that is so cool. It took me a minute to get on the same level with you, but that is so interesting.
Yeah. There are some people who go and say, you just do Reiki. I've gone and studied both Western and Eastern as much as I can, just going and fulfilling. And ultimately, Reiki is intelligent. It will go where it is needed. But Reiki practitioners can go and act as a first responder and help it get the energy quicker.
This is so cool. In America, I think a lot of Reiki practitioners not only, but I hear a lot of them that use crystals. And I have heard several of you guys all have your own different energy healing techniques that they're like a different flavor. They're like different flavors of energy healing than I've ever really heard down there.
Yeah. But I've been going and studying energy for 10 years.
Yeah.
I read things, I watch things, and I go, oh, that's really cool. Or, really doesn't work. So I just throw it out the door.
Yeah.
But I keep moving forward because there's so many little tidbits in all of the books that I have.
Yeah, and you kind of build your practice based off of what you're drawn to, and then you
Yeah.
find what you're drawn to. Sounds like with you, it's almost like synchronistic, right? Like you're like brought things are brought to you, and then if they click, and then you can kind of incorporate them.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
that's awesome, and that has to do with like that clairsentience, kind of like, or claircognizance, I guess that one would be, is just like you know what's
Um,
right for you.
when you've got that claircognizant and clairvoyance, you can think it, but the clairvoyance helps you channel it from the 5D into the 3D.
That is a good way to put it. Wow, that's a great
Yeah.
way to put it. So so like the fifth 5D would be like the energetic level above where we are down here, like a physical.
Yeah.
That's cool. So that's like dimensional. So that's like multi-dimensional channeling, it would the term be?
Yeah.
Oh,
You
that
can
is
go and call it quantum. You can go and call it, the multiverse. Marvel is great because, it's taking all the concepts, bringing it into, real world. Um, but it's going and we all carry thoughts. We all go and carry synchronicities. How do we go and bring these ideas into the world around us?
yeah, absolutely. That is fascinating. That is really fascinating. I would love to hear more. So how many courses? You said you've taken courses in a lot of different things, right?
Yes, and I could not tell you how many courses I've done. I really, truly can't. There's a lot. There's a lot.
That is
Um,
so fascinating.
I still remember going and my first Reiki course, and I'm looking at all the certificates, and I'm like, "Wow, how did you get them all?" And she's like, "I don't know. They were interesting, so I just took them." So I'm
Yeah.
like, "Cool." And now I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm the same thing." But it's
Yes.
but it's collecting the knowledge and bringing it forward so that you're constantly going and elevating yourself to a new vibrational alignment of knowledge.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you really strike a balance when it comes to empathy, mediumship, and then just like left-brained learning kind of technique-wise.
Yes. But like I like to go and say, my right brain has to get out there and create, because if she doesn't create, she's going to go and, you know, pound the left brain a little bit with her foot until she gets her way. But then I also have to go and do the left brain, which is, the 1 + 1 = 2, the 2 + 2 = 4. So going and having those in more of a harmonic balance just helps.
So when you do a healing session, do you feel like you're taking whatever you need from that like pile of tools, like, or paint palette, right? Do you have like a paint
Mhm.
palette and you feel like you're dipping into the different colors to blend what you need together? Or do you
Yeah.
have like specific readings that are for mediumship and healing and different types of healing? Or
Um, it's basically, what is the client going and looking for?
yeah,
Because that's where I want to go and start off. Because if I think you need healing and you're not even interested in it and you want to go and see what's coming up from the world ahead, we're going to look at what's coming up from the world ahead. Unless I'm getting this whole thing where it's just like, does this make sense? Okay, we're going to spend a little bit of time right here because this is important, and then we'll get to that.
that is so cool. So sometimes in like a healing session, do like ancestors or guides or people come up who like tap you on the shoulder and be like, don't forget to do this, or hey, will you mention this?
Yes, I've had that happen, and it's been very awkward because I've gone in there as just the Reiki practitioner, um, and just sort of like not even in anything. Um, my most, and I'm going to go and say traumatic event for doing a Reiki session. Um, Lovely lady was on the table, and I'm clearing the head and all of that. And then I get to her throat area. And then I am immediately thrown into a car accident. And I remember vividly going and getting up from the stool. And the person's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just give me a moment." Because I was triggered into a white car on a snowy road, hitting something, spinning, and then going end over end over end. And I'm like, "Just one moment, please. Let me just catch my breath." I'm like, "Have you recently been in a car accident?" And I described the scene, and she's like, "Yes, that happened to me a week ago. I'm surprised I'm alive." And I'm
Oh,
like,
so
and,
scary.
and I'm like, "And you didn't scream," and you wonder why you didn't scream, and your voice is hoarse and all of that. And she's like, "Absolutely." I said, "Your scream's still trapped in your throat." I said, "That's kind of why I'm hyperventilating, because I just actually like triggered it." Um, and she's like, "Oh my God, are you okay?" And I'm like, "I will be fine." I said,
As
"But this
long as
is,"
you scream.
yeah, but it was one of those like, "Just one second, I'm a little traumatized because this was my first time that this has ever happened." Um, and then we worked for about a month on it, and she was able to go and talk and just have everything come out from there. Um, and then if I'm doing a Reiki session on someone and they have screws or metal plates or anything, I have an amalgam filling in my mouth, tastes like copper pennies.
Oh, wild. Okay.
And so I remember going on someone and I'm just like, again, first time. And I'm on their left leg and I'm just like, "Just one second, I need a drink of water." Blah, 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 blah.
Yes.
Is my feel, and I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I'm just tasting metal in my mouth. Can you see?" Because there were no mirrors. "Is my filling just broken or something? Because I'm worried about my mouth." And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "Okay." But I hadn't done it. And then I immediately go to their leg again and I get that taste again. And I'm like, "Would you happen to have like
A
metal
pin.
plates or rods or something?" Apparently, from the knee down, it was all reconstructed with metal. And I'm
That's
like,
so
"Do you
scary.
feel like the metal is out of alignment with your body?" And he's like, "Absolutely." He's like, "It just feels like it's not pins and needles because that would be the nerves, but he's like, it's just like, "Rrr." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I'm telling Reiki, "Can you please go and smooth everything out?" And by the end of the Reiki session, he's like, "This is amazing." He's like, "My leg feels so much better." He's like, "It hasn't felt this good since before the accident."
Good. Well, at least you were able to kind of help with that. So you're saying
Yeah.
like almost like the type of metal that was used was like antithetical to like his vibrations, or like it just wasn't quite, maybe even like an
How to
allergy.
how to describe this is wood and it vibrates at a specific frequency.
Yep.
Our skin vibrates at a different frequency. We can agree to this?
Yes,
Then when
absolutely.
you put them together, they're going to vibrate at different frequencies. And the longer that they're out of harmonic alignment, the more you're going to go and feel that dissonance.
Oh, and if you are an energy worker, you are inherently working with someone's frequencies and vibrations. And so, as the healer, you're able to get them to change or align their
Yeah.
frequencies or vibrations better with the metal's vibrations.
Yeah. And then I go and tell everybody, check out if you've got any metal in your system, check out copper bottom socks and see if that goes and helps. Because the copper can go and help to go and ground the metals.
Because it's a conductor of energy inherently. That is fascinating. That is so interesting. And that actually, sorry, I got so excited. That is one of the best, most interesting descriptions of like energy healing I've heard, that really like solidifies for me, because you in that moment are almost like a medium to a physical degree instead of a spiritual degree, right? You're mediating their harmonic vibrations through your harmonic
Yeah.
vibrations and like using your empathy or your empathetic abilities. This is fascinating. This is
Yeah.
so fascinating.
Yeah. And this is where, energy doesn't lie. You
Yep.
can go and misinterpret it, and then you're just like, just 1 second, let me go back in the energy because I think I used the wrong word. Because you're trying to go and interpret it so that the
Yeah,
person goes and understands it.
absolutely. Yes, sure. And this is all
Yeah.
very,
And it's all
I
about building up.
I like that you're describing this kind of scientifically
Mhm.
because it's getting me to really kind of be able to rationalize it.
Yeah. And then the other thing is everybody, as they come up with something, has a different mind map. So as you come up to different experiences, you're going to go and have your own data dictionary or, oh, this means this.
Yep. That is amazing. That's actually really cool. So you are clearly very like kind of scientific minded too.
Yeah. That's the left brain.
Yeah. Do you have like education in science or is this
Oh
just the
God,
fact
yeah.
of
Computer
learning?
program analyst. So like, yeah, like let's prove this. And there's a lot of people where they're just like, well, how do you know you see auras? And I'm like, okay, if you want to play this, okay, fine. Have you ever looked through an infrared camera? Yes or no? No, I haven't. Yes, I have. Have you seen a picture of it? Well, yes, I have. And I'm like, okay, when you look at a hand, is it completely defined and everything, or do you see blobs of color?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
and that color changes depending on the heat the person is letting off or like the energy that their body is what's the
So
word?
what if we just call it aura and they just call it heat and energy?
Yeah.
It's the
Yes.
same crap.
Yep.
We just use different words to describe it.
Well, that's a really big overlap that I found with science and spirituality. Because one thing I've never actually mentioned this to anyone, and it's interesting. I kind of want to get your opinion. Do you know EVPs?
Yep.
I When I had EVPs explained to me, I had kind of this moment where I said, is that what tarot cards are? Right? Like if you're flipping through a million radio stations and then you're expecting a ghost to pick a word, is that kind of what we're doing? We're putting our kinetic energy into a pile of different meanings, and then we're kind of like waiting for those meanings to come out in interpretations. It's that same thing of like the science and the spirituality exist in the exact same world, and you can use one or the other or both, but they'll kind of have the same result.
Yeah. And the other thing is you kind of have to go down to the trust level.
Yeah.
When you've done this a while, and I mean a while, um, you'll start to go and have a quicker way to sort of go down, and everything takes a lot of practice. But for me, I have a bunch of decks that I go and have my people choose from.
Mhm.
And invariably, what's going on in their lives right now resonates with the deck.
Yep.
And on the weekend, the first card that the woman chose, and came down, blah, 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 blah. And then she's like, well, are there any messages from my grandma? And I'm like, okay, my eyes being drawn to this first card, blah, 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 blah. And it's got to do with your mother. Do you see the white butterfly here? And she's like, I'm going to stop you right there. She's like, a psychic told me about 10 years ago that white butterflies are the messages to me from my grandma. And she's like, I just I'm like in shock and awe. And I'm like, wow, that's really cool. I'm so sorry. I'm going to let you sit here and process it. But I'm like, that's cool. Let's keep going. And she's like, no, you just don't understand. And I'm like, so sorry. I will sit here. But I live in Wonderland. You're new here. Yes, this is the synchronicity that you're just like, holy shit, this is real line. And the amount of amazement that people have when you go and get them to that line are just like, oh, This is,
Yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, this is quantum. This is, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people like I know I had a coworker once, and this is a really funny one. She saw a medium for the first time, and the medium was able to channel her father for her. And she had this like days long kind of like, this changes everything. And she said, she told her husband about it, and even her husband was like, oh man. And they both looked at each other and said, oh God, if ghosts are real, we're never having sex again. They were like, "Oh, your dad is watching you? Oh God, no." But it's that thing of like people have their reaction, and their reaction usually is, "Oh, wow, this is gonna change. This changes my perception. This changes the way I'm gonna like live."
Hmm.
But it can be something as small as like a butterfly. Wow.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. So how long have you been doing this? I know you told me at the fair. Did you say 10 years?
Yeah. So as my husband goes and describes it, I've been a mouthy bitch all of my life, but just getting paid for it over the last 10 years.
God
And I
bless.
think it's perfect. I did start studying this back in 2015 when I had, time on my hands, but I've been studying this since before this. Um, I used to in my 20s. I went and studied runes so that I could go and work with them and then just got away from it. I worked with crystals and did a lot of stuff, just walked away from it. I started with the positive, the affirmations, the biannular beats. So I've been doing this a long, long time.
You mentioned binaural beats. I used to do that when I was in college. Frequencies and like sound bathing. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I used to do that in college, and I've been getting a little bit more into it now as I'm older. That is so cool. That is so cool. Binaural beats are an interesting one because frequencies are they are just so interesting. It,
Well, when you look at us, like we are simply frequency. Like the one thing that they go and say is what's really weird is technically smell does not exist. Did you know that?
No, but I can kind of get what you're saying is it's our brain's interpretation of what our nose hairs are
Yep.
picking up, like antenna
Blah blah blah.
almost is yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. That like brings me to this thing that I've always wondered about animals is what is the experience of having whiskers like? They've got to be
Yeah.
doing something.
Well, you're playing with your hair and your hair. I love how Avatar has gone and kind of explained this. Your hair has a living memory. When someone touches your hair, you don't necessarily feel it, but you're like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, leave my hair alone. That's, but it's 1,000 times more powerful. And their whiskers are just designed to go and, as they're forward facing, sort of do that echolocation. Is everything safe?
That is so interesting. I love that. I love the way that you approach this with an open mind, but a mind that's informed enough to ping.
Yeah.
Because you seem to be big on connecting dots.
I remember going through my Reiki class and going and having so many questions, and my teacher just going and saying, "This is how we do it." And I'm like, nah, there's got to be a way for this. And I go and research, and then it's just like, oh, this is the answer to my question. Why do we channel Reiki through our hands? Um, Surprisingly enough, in pain-free joints,
Yeah.
um, in and I'm going to apologize for, you know, how I go and pronounce it. Um,
Do your thing.
but ultimately, in I've got it marked. Um, According to Chinese medicine, the center of each palm is a cavity or gate called the Lagong point. P8, that is used to regulate the chi of the heart whenever the chi flow is too strong. When you are excited or nervous, even more chi accumulates around the heart. When this happens, the center of your palms will feel warm and often sweat. Because the chi of the center of the palm is always strong, you can use this chi to help the stagnant organ chi flow smoothly. Chinese physicians and Qigong practitioners have developed a number of ways in using the hands to improve the chi circulation in the internal organs. And this is basically how healers go and channel energy through their palms. Not sure if you can see it.
It
So
blurred a
it's
little
just
bit, but it
basically,
came in. That
so it's
is
just right there.
fascinating. That is
And
so interesting.
and this, we also have a Lagong point that goes into our eyes and the bottoms of our feet.
Right. And those are the places that you, right? Like your eyes are something that you can kind of channel energy with. This is fascinating because in my conversation with Elaine, I asked her as a Reiki healer if she had ever experienced sweaty palms, because they say that if you, well, I cannot remember where I heard this, but they say that if you're an energy worker or an energy healer and you aren't doing it or you're holding it back, that's when you get really sweaty palms.
And I just explained it to you.
Oh my God, that is so cool. Like my jaw dropped. I was just talking to someone else in an earlier interview. Palmistry is one of my favorite things. I use it on myself and I'm like very hesitant to use it on other people because my understanding of it is still, I mean, I don't know. It's very complicated. I understand all of the basics and everyone's hands are just so different that it's not like an astrology chart where I know for sure. But palms for sure to me have like deeper meaning because I mean there is so much that you can find in a palm and in the hand and in the planes. I don't know. I know that it's a pseudoscience, but it's one of my favorite forms of
When you start to go and understand that our meridians go through our hands and how we sense the world around us is we're actually doing energy exchanges with our hands, it makes perfect sense because this is the record of everything that we will touch and experience on this plane.
yes, and also I'm almost positive. I'm gonna say I'm positive because I've looked it up before, but our neurons have endings in our hands. So these all connect straight to our brain, specifically the lines in your palms connect right to your brain. So it's almost like a blueprint of what's in your head too.
Yeah.
Oh, that got me so excited. That was so interesting. Thank you for that piece of information because this is all kind of coming together in a way that is making energy healing make sense or energy work, because for the most part it's one of the most kind of it's literally the most woo-woo kind of thing we do, right? As like
Yeah.
healers or readers.
Yeah. And ultimately, what you have to do is pain is not there to go and be a pain. Pain is simply energy trying to move however it can.
Yeah. And also
Think of
just
it as,
messaging.
yeah, just think of it as water flowing. When the sink's blocked up, where is the blockage?
And that's where the pressure in the pipe is going to be.
Yep.
And that's where the pipe can burst.
Yep.
And so if you want to stop the pipe from bursting, then you have to address where the block is, remove the clog, and then the water will flow again. This
Yep.
is really interesting. You should teach classes.
I do. I'm a Reiki master teacher. I do a lot of soul work sessions. So when people are trying to go and work through things, they're able to go and reach out to me. But I get the biggest kick, honestly, out of teaching Reiki because I know it's people's sort of like gateway into a lot of all of this. So.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and I'm working on trying to get the MARE method out. Sort of like this is a recent download that I've been doing over January, which is magnetize, align, expand, and receive.
Don't mind me. I'm just writing that down.
Yeah. So
Magnetize, align,
expand, receive.
and receive. I
So,
love that.
so just really quick. Think about something that you want to go and have happen to you in the future. Okay. And you just sort of hold that 3D vision in. And then what you do is you just go and put your hands in a triangle. Okay. And this is you going and doing one of the strongest, believe it or not, shapes in the universe, the triangle or the pyramid. This is you going and connecting your three. So yourself, your conscious, your subconscious, and then with spirit. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what you do from here, from this triangle, is you align them and you're drawing it in a straight line.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you expand in part of a circle and then you receive in the other half of the circle.
Oh. Yes. Yes. I love that as a description too, because I mentioned this before in this series, but I have an understanding that helps me work out like how we are energetic beings, and we are the body, the soul, and the spirit. The soul is like what's driving us, the spirit's what connects us, and the body is what we are. And so when you think about like the conscious, the subconscious, and your spirit, that kind of is that same like the trinity of who we are, of like what drives us, what we are. Really, it's how I can reconcile both ghosts and reincarnation at the same time, because I definitely feel like we have like a spiritual memory that we leave behind, and we definitely have some kind of energy that we are using right now that will be brought back, that we can damage or fix, that will like continue to have that. And then we have a body that will die, really.
Yeah.
Wild. And so you're saying like aligning those three things together and like really kind of
Yeah.
drawing towards.
So this is your magnetize. I am magnetizing all parts of my being. I am aligning my thoughts and desires into consciousness, and I will expand it all the way through my aura, which will go to the end of the universe, and then I will bring in and I will receive from the universe.
I love that, because on some level we're all still attached to all of that energy, and we're just a projection, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It's so funny. Things like that sound so grand and kind of like wild to believe, but it's so universally said in every religion and every practice, and like even like a lot of scientific terms can like mean the same thing. Yes. I
Yeah.
love that so much. Make sure, yes, teach that class, write that book. I would read it. Do you write at
Yeah.
all? Have you like
I'm
written anything?
Yes, I'm actually a published author on Reiki Rays. So you can go and find my material over there. I think actually this is really bad. I think I just actually published an article last week. I'm not sure. I'd have to go and check and make sure.
That's how you know you're doing prolific work.
Where it's just like, I think I published something last week. I can't remember. I think so. I have to submit it in.
That's so
I
funny.
still remember my first one where I was just like, oh my God, they love me. They really love me. Now it's just like, yeah, I've published. I think, yeah.
That is so cool. I love how nonchalant you are about it. That's proof that you're not doing it just for fame. You're doing it to help people, though.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that was beautiful. I will definitely look up some of your writings because this is so fascinating. You have um you have like a very candid kind of like personality. I can't wait to see how your written voice translates.
Sometimes I go in, as some people are like, pull your head out of your own ass, Krista. You're just like, here, you need to come down here. And I'm like, yep, yep, you are absolutely right. I need to go and write this not for, you know, the person on high.
Yeah. Oh my God, but that is so fascinating. I mean, it takes down to earth people, salt of the earth people, people who will say what's on their mind and like connect with people. Too many people can be high and mighty.
Superficial.
Yes, too pious, really. But if you can relate to somebody, then that's half of it. That's
Mhm.
I'm glad that you write. I really am because those are like some deep insights delivered in a way that is like a real person talking. I mean, obviously we're real people talking, but very real, down to earth, salt of the earth, scientific, take what makes sense and leave the rest.
Cuts through the crap and tries to make it so that there's more understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, and accessibility. Accessibility is really the one.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. So I will say, we already kind of talked about your first experience speaking with someone who'd already passed, but do you want to speak on mediumship anymore? I always say that mediums are like the unicorns of the psychic community.
Um, and every single medium has a different way of going and sensing the energy around and how it comes through. For me, I've basically had spirit come through and they just sort of touch me on, sort of not creepily, okay, get that out of your head, but they just sort of like hover at the ears if they're grandparents, or they tap me on the shoulders for parents. And then they just sort of go down my arm to go and signify the relationship that they had. Um, and I still remember having someone in front of me, and I'm like, I just kept getting right here, and I just kept getting the words best friend, best friend, best friend. And then she just sort of stepped behind me, and I'd be like, so it's someone on your level, and it's someone, no, 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 no. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, stop it, Krista. You're second guessing. Who are you looking for? She's like, I'm looking for my mother. And I said, I'm sorry. All I keep getting is tap, tap, tap on your level. She says, best friend, best friend, best friend. And then she runs back. Tears. My mother was my best friend. We didn't have a mother daughter relationship. And I'm like, oh, this makes sense. You're mourning your mother, but you haven't mourned your best friend. This makes sense. And then it
Oh,
just all came out from
beautiful.
there. But it was just like me second, because I'm like, okay, this is really, really, really weird. Um, then there was another time where I have the woman in front of me, and I've connected to her mother, and her mother just kept showing me a watch and just, and then I'm like, okay, is a watch significant? No. And I'm like, okay. And I'm trying to connect, and the mom just goes like this, and then just starts walking around in circles in my mind. And I'm like, okay, I don't think I'm your reader. You might need to go and find somebody else for this. I spent like 2 minutes. There was no charge for it. And she got up, went along her way. Um, and then I saw she went to two other psychics, or mediums at that. And so at the end of the day, we came back together. We do have people who play test the medium and
Yeah.
will say no to every single piece of evidence we bring forward so that they get a free reading and they don't have to pay. And I'm like, oh, that's what her mother was warning me about, going and showing me the watch and kept talking, and then just up and like circling. And I'm like, Oh my God, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I had no idea what you were doing.
That is so interesting. That's really interesting. Kind of like the other side ratting them out, right?
Yeah. But when you're in integrity, stuff
Yep.
like this happens. I had someone who wanted to go and connect on two different levels. Um, so I'm like, okay, well, the first one I get is like a loving partner, someone who knows your soul. And she's like, no, 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 that's not it. And I'm like, okay. And then I'm like, okay, just step back. And then everything else just came through and like hit the nail on everything, blah, blah, blah. She walked away, but she came back that same day for another reading. And I'm like, but you were here. She's like, yeah, but you were so on tap with all of this. I wanted to see if you could go and connect. And I'm like, okay, who do you want to connect with? She's like, my fiance, my ex-fiance, my ex-partner, my ex, boyfriend. And I'm like, are you kidding me? She's like, what do you mean? And I said, the first spirit that came through for me was a masculine one, the partner, the one that loved your soul. Remember the romantic relationship and you denied it.
Oh, it's
And then
so easy to
immediately
kind of
burst
reading
into
now.
tears because she's like, oh my God, it was. And we went there. But he was already coming through on that. Um, and then so I'm doing the secondary reading. It's coming through and all of this. And then there was a snowball bush behind her.
Mhm.
There was no wind, but there was one branch that kept going like this. And
How
I'm like, okay.
interesting.
And I said, I hope this is significant because he keeps signaling snow and white, not snow white, but snow and white.
Hmm.
And she got really just, she's like, you have no idea. He died in whiteout conditions in the snow.
Oh, that's so scary. Oh man.
And I'm
So,
like, thank you. Because it was just like he wouldn't leave it alone. Like, this is significant. You need to let her know.
and so you're saying there was like a clairvoyant kind of vision of a branch, or like a literal real branch
No,
outside.
it was a real branch. In my vision, there was no wind and one branch. One branch just kept going like this. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I hope this makes sense. I hear snow and I hear white. Not snow white, but snow and white. And the family had always wondered if it was a suicide. And I said, no, it wasn't. I
Oh,
said,
what a
because
great
he's
piece of
confirming the snow and the white.
that is an amazing piece of validation to be able to give someone, though. Like
Yeah,
really, truly. And snow
yeah,
is very dangerous.
yeah,
Especially up here in Canada where you get so much of it. I can see snow being the cause of a lot of different people's problems.
yeah. So it's the confirmation, it's the touch points. And like for me, I try to go and bring through. If it doesn't make sense, then I go and ask them, who are you looking for? Because sometimes I can't channel them and I will be flat out, I'm not getting a connection. I'm
Yeah,
not getting anything. I might not be your reader.
for sure. And that's a good thing to be able to tell people, right? Because that's another one
Yeah,
of those tests. That's another litmus test, right? It's
yeah,
one of those things where you aren't trying to trick people, you aren't trying to take money, and you are doing the work. And maybe
yeah,
there's somebody else who connects more, because I think a
yeah,
lot of what we go through in our life gives us the tools to help who we help.
yeah.
And if we don't have the tools, then we aren't the one to help them, and someone else does.
And there was a recent one where the woman sat down and it was just a snap, and like nothing I was saying was making sense to her. And I said, okay, I don't think I'm your reader. There is no charge, there isn't anything, but it's not connecting with you. Like what I'm saying, you're not you're going and saying it doesn't resonate, it doesn't make sense. No harm, no foul, no charge. There's a lot of other people here. You know, I've gotten to the point in my career, I'm confident to go and say I'm not people's readers, whereas before I'd struggle and try to. But the woman went and basically bad mouthed me, like, oh, that woman had no idea, da, 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 da. But people are just like, Krissey, she knows her shit. Like, okay, what did she say? Well, I'm not her reader. And they're like, well, not everybody is for everyone. Like going
No.
and trying to. Um, and then afterwards, she had gone to two psychics and sort of had conversations with them. And she's like, oh, did you pick up this? And I'm like, yeah, because I was like this. And she's like, what did she say to she? I said, she said no. I said, does this make sense? And she literally said no. But she goes to you and says yes. And you're like,
That's a
yeah.
wild one.
So you just, and that's the whole thing. You've got to be able to go and be solid and sure in your own gifts and abilities. And the only way you're going to get that is practice and practice and practice.
Also, people have to be ready to get a reading with mediumship, especially. They have to be ready to receive the message, because if you go and you try to get a reading from a loved one, it's you have to be in the right mindset too, because your reader can't do all the work for you, and your reader is going to be able to bring information through. To sound patronizing to listeners or viewers or anything, but if you're not ready to get your reading, your reader can't do miracles. They're not going to ever pull the person back. You're not going to see your loved one. You're just going to be able to get a couple pieces of confirmation and then maybe a message. And that's, unfortunately, no one's resurrecting anybody. Nobody's giving you a glimpse through a
Not
veil.
that's even the genie in Aladdin. I don't do that. That's creepy.
Yeah, right. But it's also, I will say, as someone who has this as a gift, like, do you also run into the issue where your own loved ones are difficult to challenge for at least until you've handled the grief?
So it's been a while since I've had people pass on.
Oh,
Remember, my mom, dad, my mom and dad died when in the 20s. Um, I've got my step parents that are elderly and they'll be going and passing. So that's right there. I'm an animal communicator, and animals generally come through like that for me, unless there's a whole bunch of grief on the other person's side, in which case that doesn't. Live animals come through for me as well. But the weirdest experience I had was when I was at a show in Barrie, my
yeah.
very first time as a medium, and I had my dad and my mom standing behind me, and I'm like, this is not take your parents to work day,
I
please
love
leave.
that as
And
a
they're like,
quote.
no, no, it's fine. We're here to support, because they're like, that's where I grew up. That's where they're buried. But it was just like, I'm like so literally embarrassed. I'm like, I'm not doing any mediumship readings this weekend. I can't. Like, my parents are just like, no, 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 we can help you connect. And it's just like, so I had a wonderful conversation with my parents
Yeah.
that entire weekend, but it was just like horrifying. Like, just, could you not? Like, just,
Yes. Well, some
and
people
it was just
have
like,
some people have loved ones that are like their work with them, right? Like people who've passed on that
yeah.
like work with them through mediumship. But it's interesting that you're like, you almost have like the rebellious teenager attitude. Like, come on, mom.
Yeah. Well, I don't usually go and work with them to go and connect. I usually go out to the grandmother, the grandfather, because there's less karmic drama and lineage from there. So I'm not really using sort of like a channeler to go through. I'm trying to get right to the person. But that weekend, it was just, they were trying to go and show up for me. and just sort of apologize, as it were, for, making it so hard for me to actually lean into my gifts when they were around.
That's so funny. That's an
Yeah.
interesting. I
But
have
it
like
was, it's not take your parents to work day. Seriously, can you just go?
I have kind of a similar story, but both my parents, thank the Lord, knock on wood, all of that. I hope they're here forever. But they were both with me at a show that I did because it was a craft show and my mom was selling things and I was doing readings next to them. And it was wild to have my parents watch me read because they have been in the past people who've been like, that's not real. You can't do that. My mom, my maternal side is like great grandmother, great great grandmother, grandmother, my mom, all intuitives, all my cousins, kids. And my dad's side is the Irish side, so it's there, but we hide it. You know what I mean? But they watched me do readings all day for people that they grew up with because we were in their little community, and I had no idea who these people were. I just did my readings. And it was wild to watch them. Like our parents can be amazed at what we do. So even in spirit, it's interesting to know that they'll kind of stick back and like eavesdrop a little bit. But that's so cute. Yeah, it was really interesting to have my parents at Bring Your Parents to Work Day. That is
Yeah.
so cool. You are such an interesting person to talk to. Do you
Thank
have any
you.
other I guess one of the last things I ask is, do you have any advice that you would give people that you think viewers or listeners should have?
So ultimately, what we do is we're playing wink with the universe. We're watching for all of those synchronicities of the universe coming in. It's the butterflies. It's the meme that I just went and took a picture of this morning is coming up in this reading. Here's this. Usually the universe goes and prepares me the week before I go out to a show and they bring me the memes and I'm like recording them or whatever, posting them, and invariably somebody's going to go and have it.
Yeah.
I was gifted a coaster. I was never going to use it, so I brought it this weekend and I put it there. And finally, someone grabbed it on Saturday, and it said, "Dance like nobody's watching because they're all on their phones anyway." And the person who picked it up and laughed was a dance coach. She's
Yeah.
like, "You have no idea how much is this?" And I'm like, "No, it's free because of this." She's like, "Are you serious? This makes so much sense." She's like, "It's going to go up in my studio and everything. Like, this is like totally true.
Also,
They're
like
all
a
on
good
their phones
story.
anyway." Yeah.
If you're like a psychic or a medium, if you can give someone a good story, then that's half the battle.
Yeah. But it's all of these synchronicities where we're able to go and sit back and go, whoa, that's a big one. Because sometimes I like to go and say, my guides have to go and sort of hit me with a 10 by 10, not a 2 by 4, because it takes a lot to get me to pay attention at times. But that's where having the meditations, not a lot, you can go and start doing it for like 2 minutes a day, just being quiet, breathing, and just connecting with your higher self. And what I also like to say is your reading isn't going to be 100% making sense because we're trying to go and interpret something of energy and we might get it wrong a little bit.
Yeah, there's something to be said too about the fact that everyone goes into situations with their own energy, and just in talking to another person any given day, there's nerves, there's anxiety. And so I know when I get readings, there are times when my reader has said something that's so on point, and I just kind of was like, mm-hmm. I was really guilty before I was a reader of doing the non-verbal client. Okay, keep proving yourself. Keep
Yeah.
going. You know what I mean? And it is that thing of you have to remember that you're not always comfortable in every social situation anyway. And
Yeah.
so maybe your ego's getting in the way as like a client side.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, if you're going around at a big psychic fair, please, for the love of God, don't go and say, well, what do you go and sense around me? What we are trying to go and cycle through as many people as we can for clients. If we are going and reading everybody across the table, that is over 1,000 people coming through in a day, and we can't handle that energy.
And nobody,
Um,
God bless you for just even being able to talk to that many people.
But when you go and say, well, well, who do you see around me? I get to the point of now I'm like, I don't do that. And they they sit there and they're stunned. Well, why don't you? Because if I did that for everyone, I wouldn't have any energy to give to my clients. And that's not
And
fair to the clients.
there's the unspoken / spoken between us rule of readers of don't do a reading without consent. And so, I mean, if a reader is sitting across the table in your position and they tell you that they're getting something and that you should get a reading, that's a red flag, right? So it's really like until you are sitting in the booth in the area, like it's almost it wouldn't be kosher for the person across the table to tell you that. I know I got a reading from Max when I went back the next day to that fair, and it was something where I met all of you guys, and let me tell you, if I had unlimited time and unlimited money, I would have been behind every single one of your tables, because you all do different things. You all seem to be experts in what you do. Really, if you're a Canadian and you're watching these, go to these psychic fairs. I cannot tell you, you will understand who you need to go to. But Max literally was like, yep, as soon as we were talking, I knew that I was going to read for you eventually. It was just a matter of when you came around. And that's what you're looking for, is someone that both of you can know that you're going to do a reading, or that you should do a reading, but they aren't telling you. No one should tell you who to go to, and no one should tell you how you should be asking for, you know what I mean? You know what I mean. I hope that the listeners know what I mean. It's about who you connect with, and not about somebody being able to be like, well, you had a pet dog at the age 12. Would you like to have a reading now?
Yeah.
It just isn't productive.
No. And as I said, like if we went and started going and doing that, I honestly wouldn't have the energy at the end of the day to go and actually, do anything.
Yep.
You'd be burned out within the first hour. And that honestly it's basically going and asking every single person there to jump rope for 5 minutes. Instead of going and I'm on this stage in like an hour and that's when I jump rope.
Yeah. Yes. You're asking a performer to give you a performance before their performance, but their performance needs all their energy for their performance. Yes. I love that.
But it makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. That's such a good, that's good food for thought for anyone. That's good advice. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if anybody goes and says, oh, you are so dark, I can't read you, there's so much trauma. That's psychic trauma. Please go and close your computer or whatever. Get off the phone. We don't do that. It's gentle, loving, light messages. I've had so many people come to me because they've reached out to someone from India or whatever, and like they're going to do a reading, and then it's just like, oh, well, they call them at 2:00 in the morning saying that they're cursed. And
I hate the curse thing. The curse thing drives me crazy. If you feel like you're cursed, spin an egg. Not really that, but
yeah. But Hollywood has done such a wonderful job of putting in, psychic trauma, religious trauma. That's not what we do. It's gentle, loving, guided messages, or women walking around in your head because somebody's wasting your time.
yeah, right. And there is this thing too of like, even the Catholic Church doesn't do exorcisms anymore because usually it's kind of bullshit and a little bit damaging. So I like that you're bringing that into it too. Yeah. And the fake readings from online people in different, not to like scapegoat out like the countries over there, but like it is kind of where they're coming from. Like people online who are fake and offering these readings, just like, I don't know, you can't trust anyone in your DMs. Anyone who messages
Yeah.
people on social media, it's just a red flag. Yeah,
Yeah.
Lindsay had the same message.
Yeah. And ultimately, there are so many people that are stepping into their power and authentic and honest and with integrity alignment.
Mhm.
You've got a plethora of choices.
Yes, absolutely. And also going in person. I will say, I know that a lot of you guys probably do virtual readings, but like find a fair in your area, because I had never really been to a lot of fairs. Like you guys up here do it different and in a way that I have really admire. But if there's fairs in people's area, go in, because as soon as you're walking around that room, you know deep down who you need in that moment, or who you need to learn something from that you've never heard something from.
Yeah.
And that resignation, that resignating,
Resonates.
yes, resignation or whatever is exactly what you need. You need to know ahead of time. And even if you are skeptical of certain people, that's not to say that you shouldn't give them a chance too, right? Like, yeah, some people will prove themselves when you least expect it to.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. My last question is for anyone looking at, or like watching or listening, how can they find you? How can they support you? Where can they find like your written work or
So, the best place to go and find me is follow me on Facebook at Metamorphosis Journey into Purposeful Living, or on Instagram, Metamorphosis Journey into Purposeful Living, or just Metamorphosis JIPL. You can get me on Gmail, so Metamorphosis JIPL at gmail.com. I'm working on my website right now. It's a work in progress, as we all are.
yes. Websites are the hardest part, really.
Yeah. Finding someone to go and sort of have your vision forward and not make you look or feel inauthentic.
Yep.
That's kind of where, but when you're sort of like the one person stop shop, you can't do everything for yourself. So yeah.
I know I'm really lucky. When I went to college, I went to art school for digital media, and let me tell you, that has come in clutch in this career, because it's like the reading, the intuitiveness. Like always kind of was sad I couldn't go to school for that, but with online readings and websites and social media, and I wouldn't be able to do what we're doing right now without all of that know-how. I'm really lucky that my second skill is digital media.
Yes.
But cool. So you'll have a website soon.
Yeah.
With your written work, I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for, but how do I find that other than just Googling your name?
So you can go and get them on Reiki Rays, but when the website goes up, my written work is going to get on there too.